And so when she says, like, oh, I've heard that voice hundreds of times, thousands of times, to me that suggests, I've heard you while I was killing you.
Like, let me confirm that. Could you scream in pain and fear for a second?
Oh, my God, I'm on fire. Oh, perfect. That's,
that's you.
That's the one. That's you. Hail, Internet. It's Paul. It's Matt. The Dork Lords. We're here talking about The Mandalorian Season 2 finale, The Rescue. All right, we open with the crew on Slave 1 disabling a ship with an ion cannon, like some kind of like an EMP burst. They board the ship, and they kidnap the clone engineer that we've seen a few times, starting with Season 1. He gives them intel on Moff Gideon's ship. So now we got to go get Grogu. We end with, spoiler alert, Luke Skywalker carrying Grogu away, leaving Gideon's ship while
that's
Mando
the end?
And the rest of the crew, I know, good point, and the rest of the crew look on. Then there's a post-credit scene, which Paul's referring to, which is Boba Fett and Fennec sometime later, back on Tatooine, storming Jabba's palace, which is now being run by a rotund Bib Fortuna. Boba kills Bib. Boba and Bib. And you see Boba Fett push the body of Bib Fortuna out of the throne. He sits on the throne of the Hutts. Fennec sits there as well, drinking some spatchka. And we see this little title card come up and say, The Book of Boba Fett, coming December 2021. We have confirmation from Jon Favreau that those are two different series. It's not like the Mandalorian season 3 involves the Book of Boba Fett. No, two different series.
Yes,
and they're coming roughly at the same time, so it'll be interesting.
No, anyway, that's wrong. That's incorrect. It's 2022.
Mando season 3 is coming in 2022. Yeah, what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, because they're coming at different times.
Gotcha. We'll hit the major talking point right off the bat, which is Luke Skywalker. I'll just say it. I'm going to say it, Paul, because
go ahead.
I was wrong.
Wow.
There. I said it. Huh? How about that? I had said a few weeks ago when we were debating who's this Jedi that Grogu's going to reach out to, and I had wished at the time that I said, I don't think I really want it to be Luke Skywalker because I want the universe to be bigger, and I would rather the Mandalorian not be dependent on the Skywalker saga.
But now you're saying this universe is just right.
Just right. No, and I guess I still cling to that idea in a long-term scale. I still would rather have this universe be bigger. But in this moment, I mean, nothing was as impactful, could have been as impactful as Luke Skywalker showing up in that moment.
Yes, true. And, you are talking about, the Jedi. So that's, it's very clear where Luke stands in that whole,
Yep. Yeah, because I was convinced it was going to be Ezra Bridger, and so convinced, in fact, that I watched it unspoiled. Paul, early in the morning, sent me basically a single word. I think it was interesting. Yes. So Paul had watched the show. You didn't lie. And so I didn't know what that meant, but I interpreted that as uh-oh, I should watch this and probably watch it before I get spoiled on this. So I immediately watched the episode. And then when the big moment comes and it's oh, look, there's a single X-Wing approaching. Great line from Cara Dune where she's oh, a single X-Wing. Well, now we're saved. She was right. She's prophetic. She probably uses the Force. And so it's coming in, and the whole time I'm it's Ezra Bridger. It's Ezra Bridger. There's literally zero chance that it's Luke Skywalker in this moment for me. So Ezra Bridger can pilot an X-Wing, sure. He arrives, gets out. Oh, black hooded cloak. Sure, looks like a male single. Sure, it's Ezra Bridger. Good, Ezra Bridger. Green lightsaber. Ezra Bridger has a green lightsaber. Ezra Bridger. It's fine. Then I see this gloved hand. I'm man, Ezra Bridger is going out of his way to look like Luke Skywalker. And I'm still I did not get it until the reveal.
Like Kylo Ren much?
Yeah, right. It's Kylo. It's little 4-year-old Kylo. So I was shocked, surprised, thrilled, and they definitely made the right call. It was an amazing reveal. That hallway fight scene is very cool too, because it was hearkening back to his dad's much more sinister fight in Rogue One, where he went through a hallway of people. Luke's going through a hallway of robots. Like, okay, do what you want to robots. But he even ends with that same kind of, the trachea grab, but on a robot instead of on a person. So like father, like son. Very cool. And then, so we get this great reveal, and it was a very cathartic moment. What were your thoughts there as you saw Luke, or you probably got it before I did. But.
Yeah, well, when I saw the X-Wing, I think I was thinking of Luke, but when I saw the glove, I was just like, I think I didn't think it was just one. I think it was 2-hand gloves or whatever, because I wasn't trying to figure anything out. Like, oh, who could this be? I just don't know that many Jedi. So I
was just trying to prove my point.
Ezra, I haven't even seen the Clone Wars or the Rebel Wars or whatever. I haven't seen any of that. So I was just waiting to see, and it was like, oh wow, and I think I did at least the first time. I think I even heard after that Luke's theme, and so I thought it was cool and everything, but and I think I wasn't as closely watching the first time. Subsequent, I've been sort of looking again, like, I wish it was better. The way his
the CGI in his face.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they had two ways to go there, right? They could either recast or do CGI. And I think given the fact that scene was short, it was, 3 minutes, something like that the CGI, I think, was probably a better choice in that moment, just because it does automatically tell you it's Luke Skywalker. There's no moment of like, oh, is this a person that looks like Luke who is not? Oh, it's okay. He has to say it. Whatever. In this case,
they didn't need R2D2 to try to sell the moment more. Like, oh, look how he's turning his head. Or does he have a little sign that comes out of his head and says, "This is really Luke."
Luke's Mark Hamill, right there. No, they did not have to do that. They didn't have to go that route. And so,
maybe if they'd had R2D2 say McClunky, maybe that would have sold it.
Did you hear it?
Yes, I did.
They do a McClunky.
Yeah, I did.
At the end, they added a McClunky.
It's now the thing you say before you get killed.
It's my favorite word now in Star Wars lore. McClunky. Oh, get ready.
Yeah, on your deathbed, you can be like, you must put this on my tombstone.
Right.
I'm about to kick now. McClunky.
Matthew Rice. McClunky. He McClunkied. Put it like a verb. I don't know.
There you go.
Very impactful moment. A great moment in Star Wars history, it basically, is this moment of seeing Luke Skywalker in his prime, really. Like prime Jedi abilities kicking ass.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, wow.
I've heard some criticism too that people felt that he was more, or at least some people liked him more, as the avenging, kick-ass Jedi in this, more than previous turns.
When you say previous turns, what do you mean? Like,
well, I mean, even I think felt like after The Empire Strikes Back. And the beginning of Return of the Jedi, when he's got the cloak on or whatever.
Oh, sure.
And I think I wanted him to be more badass than he was.
At the time, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, I think the idea was, I could be wrong, but that he was still, kind of in the learning phase at that point. Like,
well, yeah, and after that he goes back to Yoda, right? And he's like, "Oh, you're finished. I'm here to finish my training. No, you're done."
We get the feeling that, because this is like 4 to 5 years after the events of Return of the Jedi. Like, is this his first student? Like, in other words, has Grogu reaching out been the catalyst for Luke to be like, maybe I should see if there's some other Force sensitives around who need my help? Or has he already been like, hey, I got a nursery of kids? I don't know.
Right,
feel like
he starts teaching Grogu, like, I'm pretty good at this.
I'm pretty. What? You know what? I should open a daycare. I think I got a pretty good.
Hey, Leia, you want to send your kid over?
Yeah, right. I'm sure. What could go wrong? So that happens like 20 years later.
Yeah.
FYI, in the timeline. So this is way before the Academy goes kaboom due to Ben Solo and such. So. This could be the first moment when Luke decides maybe I should become a teacher for the next generation. Who knows? Anyway, so this great moment comes right after that. It's this goodbye scene with Mando and Grogu, and it's very impactful. I mean, great storytelling here. The fact that Grogu wants to see Mando's face. Mando lifts the helmet. There's this great, again, all nonverbal. It's not dialogue heavy. It's just, you can tell what's happening just on the faces, and great puppet work. Give him credit.
Yeah.
It's great on many levels. One level, it's the fact that we see this arc for Mando has been embracing his humanity, and the fact that maybe that Mandalorian culture, the idea that they have to wear their helmet at all times, and they have to basically keep everyone at arm's length. In order to be supreme fighters. The fact that he was willing to let in this child is, this moment of growth for him. And we see it right there in that moment. Plus, a nice little counterpoint to the Dark Troopers, who, in this episode, that the clone engineer says, oh yeah, we took the last weakness out of them, their humanity. So now they're perfect fighting machines, robots.
Yeah.
They have helmets, but no human face underneath. So again, we see this idea that maybe he's transcended that notion of what he used to think of as like the perfect person is now like, you know what? Oh, actually, embracing my humanity is something that brings me joy and fulfillment. And then on top of that, you got the layer that Luke Skywalker is watching this, and Luke Skywalker 5 years earlier had the exact same scenario practically with his dad. Help me take my mask off.
Yes.
Let me look upon you with my own eyes. And then boom, you got this dad saying goodbye to his de facto son the same way. I mean, beautiful. Loved it. I mean, that was, that's quality storytelling is what that is. We'll talk a little bit about what we think for season 3 is coming up in a second. But some other thoughts about the rest of the episode, good sir. What are some thoughts you had?
I liked some of the, you had the clashing of Boba Fett and Bo-Katan, Bobo, of the Bows fighting with a different sort of philosophy. And, of course, the unspoken one of, Din Djarin, of Mandalorians, to the point where it's like they don't even respect each other. Boba Fett is like, oh, you want to go back to that planet? It's turned into glass, and Bo-Katan, she's like telling him like, oh, you're not a Mandalorian, so she doesn't even accept him as a Mandalorian. It's like he had to deal with that in the episode when he first met, Din Djarin. But then eventually he said, okay, no, you are a Mandalorian, once he saw his right,
the family tree and such. But you're right. It sounds like Bo-Katan, and upon hearing Boba's voice, recognizes him as one of the clone army, basically. And so when she says like, oh, I've heard that voice hundreds of times, thousands of times, to me that suggests, I've heard you while I was killing you.
Like, oh, let me confirm that. Could you scream in pain and fear for a second?
Oh my God, I'm on fire! Oh, perfect.
That's you.
That's the one. That's you. We get the feeling that in Mandalorian culture, there's probably this almost like a little scar that happens where maybe people associate the clone army with Mandalorians, and to Mandalorians are like, what's a terrible insult. They're not Mandalorians, they're just clones of a guy. Jango
I wonder
Fett,
too if we're getting like sort of a clue about how the next season's going to play out, if it happens to be about retaking Mandalore. She stops the fight by saying, if we had this sort of spine, when we were being attacked, we wouldn't be in this situation now, basically.
And for the difference between Boba Fett and the rest of the clone army is that Jango chose, give me one of the clones so I can raise him as my son.
Yeah.
And so Boba does have this familial connection to Jango. And so when he says that's my father's armor, he's not speaking of like one of millions of soldiers that could lay claim to the same thing.
Yeah.
He actually did get raised by a person who was a foundling like Mando, but took the creed and was, immersed in Mandalorian culture. So Boba would have grown up knowing Mandalorian culture and had much more of a claim to the idea of saying, I'm at least connected to the Mandalorian culture, as opposed to the rest of the clone army, which, they were guys who didn't have any kind of creed necessarily. I think this will also play into season 3. The idea of outsiders. This idea that they, not all Mandalorians obviously, but the orthodox Mandalorians are like, don't show your helmet to anyone. What that suggests to me is like, it's hard to get to know someone. As we've seen, Mando and Grogu, there was an obstacle between them getting to know each other. They worked it out, but it was kind of almost like a fluke of circumstance. Normally, I would think it would be a big imposition to try to get to know a Mandalorian if they never take their armor off around you. You're like,
Yeah, I wonder if Bo-Katan and Din Djarin are going to try to enlist these other Mandalorian who are more strict. What is the name of their sect? I forget.
Right, the Death Watch.
Yeah. So enlist them in the attempt to take back Mandalore.
That's a good point. I also think perhaps we might see,
and some of them might challenge, Bo-Katan for the Darksaber.
Good point. If she is not respected, perhaps that could be a fight for power. But also maybe we get a sense that there's a thing about the hero's journey. I'll bring that up in a second. But
it does have to do with Lord of the Rings, so maybe it's not the right time.
I actually don't have to bring Lord of the Rings into it, Paul, just in case you... I was going to use it as a perfect example of the hero's journey, but no. But
how can anything involving Lord of the Rings be perfect?
But no, okay, so hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's version, has basically 17 stages, and if I were to figure out where we've left off at the end of season 2, I would say we're at the end of stage 14, which is basically where our hero achieves the quest at hand. In this case, find a Jedi to train Grogu, but also is quote unquote rescued from without. And so, in other words, something from outside comes and saves your ass, a la Luke Skywalker in this situation. But that's not the end of the journey. That's the end of this quest. But the journey itself means now you somehow have become transformed yourself. You go back to your home, to the real world, away from this quest. But you're now you are bringing back new wisdom, and you're also informing yourself with new wisdom. But you're also perhaps informing your home, your culture with a new way of thinking. And so I think perhaps that, with that in mind, if Mando obviously has learned something, he took his mask off to connect with Grogu, maybe the idea that like outsiders aren't terrible, I can imagine maybe in the next season he enlists the aid of outsiders to help free Mandalore, perhaps. Something that like the Mandalorians would be like, boo, we must do it ourselves. He might be like, you know what? Actually, connection between individuals is not a terrible thing.
Are you including the Death Watch as outsiders?
I'm not. It wouldn't be a Death Watch thing. I think it would be like different cultures, maybe. I don't know. Okay. I'm just saying, generally speaking, maybe that's the way that this newfound humanity in him manifests itself. I don't know. It could manifest itself in different ways, but I was thinking maybe one way might be, this idea that we have to be so closed off and not make ourselves vulnerable to people is not necessarily the best way to do things. I
guess, to me though that suggests, perhaps having some way of trying to engage again with the Death Watch in, because certainly they had that scene earlier on where like, have you taken your helmet off? And he was like, no, I haven't. So it seems like demands that again is to be asked again if he's taken his helmet off, and for him to say, well, yeah, a couple times.
I mean, technically, what do we mean by off? I've eaten soup. I feel like a transformed Mando might start to transform the old ways of doing things in the Mandalorian culture, perhaps. Speaking of which, we've got this thing where, hey, whoever wields the Darksaber rules Mandalore. Bo-Katan had the Darksaber. It was taken from her somehow by Moff Gideon.
Sure.
I would guess, the most likely scenario is somehow in combat. He bested her and took it and ran off.
Well, here's the thing, though, right? Like, from her perspective, if she loses it in battle, then she's got to gain it back in battle, right?
Right.
From his perspective, though, if she's just like, let me put this down for a minute, and he picks it up, he still has it, and he doesn't care about whether or not he gained it in battle. Her stealing it from him.
He being Moff Gideon?
Yeah. Or, if anybody, like, for instance, if he had, like, she went to this place, and, she trusted the people there, and somehow Moff Gideon was able to get it from them, like, somehow. So, it didn't necessarily have to happen that way. It might have happened that way. And then, for some reason, Moff Gideon wasn't able to kill her afterwards,
Right. Now, do we, I guess I didn't know this, is Moff Gideon considered the ruler of Mandalore at this point? By force, I suppose, but, like, do the Mandalorians acknowledge, like, oh, Moff Gideon, he's got the Darksaber, he must be the ruler? I don't know that.
I would assume no, but,
The way that this comes down is Bo-Katan wants to prove herself by fighting Moff Gideon and taking the Darksaber back. She doesn't get the chance because Mando does it.
Yeah.
Beats Moff Gideon, doesn't kill him, is very happy to give the saber to her, like, here, fine, I yield, take it.
Yeah.
But she's like,
that's what she gets for not being specific. When she was like, leave him to me, she should have been like, do not fight him, especially if he's got the Darksaber.
Yeah. I know. She
whoever has the Darksaber will rule. You're not going to want to rule, are you? Din Djarin? And she doesn't know.
I guess that's why she wasn't more specific, because she thought maybe she didn't realize that Mando didn't care, and so maybe she thought, well, maybe Mando will try to take advantage of it. So I'll just leave it,
Oh, the irony of him just offering it to me. Right. If we just had some way for him to call and be like, could you get yourself over here? I've got Moff Gideon right in front of me with the Darksaber.
He's here. He's
like, I will just keep repelling you until she gets here.
Right.
I won't try to defeat you.
So right now, Din Djarin has, I guess, as much claim as anybody to the Mandalorian throne.
Yeah.
He's got the Darksaber, and he won it fair and square off of the bad guy. But, so I was trying to think of, like, what are loopholes? What are ways you can... Now, obviously, the honor of the situation calls for, I guess, in the moment, that she has to defeat Din Djarin in combat. I don't think she has to kill him, because he didn't kill Moff Gideon to get the saber, so I don't think she has to kill him, but she has to somehow beat him and take the saber.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I'm like, that's only if he keeps it, right? What's to keep Mando from just putting the saber on the floor and going, all right, gotta go, and just leaving, and the saber's there? I guess people would still say, oh no, even though he left it, he's still the right guy. I don't know, just like, okay, I literally don't have it anymore, so you didn't have to fight me for it. Just if you don't take it, someone else will. You might as well pick it up.
Yeah, it's like, does she need someone to defeat
Mando, and then she defeats that person?
Yeah, she needs someone to defeat them and fight them, or
what maybe if that could be the way it breaks down.
One thing I suggest to you is that they could have just went into the hangar, and Din could have given the Moff Gideon the back here. Yeah, you have it back. Now fight me again. And they're like, oh, and then like, okay, you jump in now, and then she could finish the fight.
You could totally do a World Wrestling Federation type.
Yeah.
Off the top rope. Oh, he dropped the elbow. All right, you won. Yeah. You got it. Here's the thing. But apparently that's not you can't stage it. It's got to be in real time. So this made me think of something. So at the time when I watched it, there's a scene where Moff Gideon pretends to relent. Like, look, you take the kid, go our separate ways.
Yes.
And then Mando turns his back,
yes.
and Moff Gideon hits him, and they start a fight.
Yes.
So at the time I was thinking, God, they were both pretty dumb in that moment. First Mando turning his back on the villain, and then also Moff Gideon, who had just finished saying, like, assume I know everything. Like, doesn't know that Mando's got Beskar, but Beskar will stop a Darksaber because like, pooing, you're like, oh, great. But maybe he did know everything, and he was actually, it was his intention to lose all along. That, they play a dangerous game because losing could mean dying. But if maybe he thought, okay, if I lose, but don't die, and Mando gets this thing, there's going to be conflict between the two people who are opposed to me right now, and so in some ways I make enemies of my enemies. Maybe. I don't know. He stays alive. Of course, he tries to kill himself, but Cara Dune keeps him alive because she wants to question him. I assume he, in fact, I think I saw that Esposito's been signed on for season 3, so he's back season 3, and I'm going to guess at some point he gets rescued, right?
He signed up for season 3, is that what you heard?
I did hear that.
Because I was thinking maybe he was going to,
jump to another series or something?
Yeah, because, Cara Dune is presumably going to that, The
Rangers of the New
Rangers,
Republic? Yeah. She could also, though, be on this show.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, she could do both.
My guess is that Moff Gideon will still be if not the villain, will be a villain in the Mandalorian show. So they maybe get some information from him, but then there's some big breakout thing. Like the Empire comes and breaks him out. And he's like, maybe there's even a Darksaber moment there or something. But anyway, I've got it again. Oh, damn it. Now she can beat me. Oh, crap. I mean, you take it, Mando. Why does this thing keep following me?
Hot potato.
I did like another part of that bar scene where we were just saying that they disrespect Boba for being a clone. The sidekick to Bo-Katan, Casca Reeves, she says something to Boba like, "Oh, I didn't realize sidekicks could talk," something like that. Which he says like, "That's pot calling of a kettle. Look at you." But if you think about that, in some ways, Grogu is Mando's sidekick.
Okay.
Doesn't talk.
Yeah.
And
Robin to Din's Batman.
Yeah. And then R2, while R2 can communicate with beeps and words, R2 doesn't talk either. So Luke's sidekick comes out, the reveal there, and makes a little connection to Grogu.
Sure. Yeah.
And so anyway, but it's just interesting that we have a series of non-talking sidekicks.
Much cuter than R2 and Yoda.
Right. Well, actually, that's true. R2 probably thought like, "Oh God, it's another Yoda." Like he probably recognized certainly the race, right? And like, "Oh, you hit me with a stick back in the day." I saw some call that perhaps even R2 might even remember Grogu from Coruscant. I mean, perhaps before the Order 66. I mean, one of the things about the Darksaber, this idea of that the sword of leadership. I mean, that's in a lot of different legends, right? You've got the Arthurian legends, Excalibur. You've got Siegfried,
Roy,
and Roy with their tiger sword. The idea of the sword is the symbol of leadership, but also the idea of the reluctant ruler. And so we could be seeing that the idea of Mando becoming, he doesn't want obviously rulership of Mandalore right now. doesn't.
No.
I feel like they could be pushing him in that direction, and that at some point he ends up becoming the symbolic leader, if not the de facto leader of Mandalore. There's a lot of heroic stories that go that way. In the case of Arthur, it's the who can pull the sword from the stone. It's a similar idea to like who can win the Darksaber. And when Arthur, in one of the legends, probably the most popular version of the legend, he's not trying to pull the sword from the stone to be king. He's just trying to my foster brother needs a sword for this tournament. Oh, here's one. Here you go. And so he has this the right to rule kind of thrust on him, and not something he ever sought. And so I feel like perhaps Mando might be down that road as well. I could see that maybe by the end of season 3, he's got people on Mandalore that are looking to him as this ruler, and he's having to go like, oh, geez, what do I do? How do I rule things? I don't even know I know how to like kill a guy. I know how to like make a tent and survive in the cold. Administrating and taxes. I don't know.
I have doubts if it'll go there.
How do you foresee then this arc of, Bo-Katan wants to rule, Mando doesn't, but Mando has the right at the moment to do it. So how do you see that working out?
Yeah, I mean, they could establish some sort of contest, where people fight or whatever, and then at the end of the contest that's established, they could decide to table it, wait till we take Mandalore and then we can decide it, and Bo-Katan will still be trying to do it, and Mando has agreed to help.
Let's take the place back first.
Let's do it first, yeah.
Then we'll talk about it.
Yeah, and really she's like hopefully he'll, get killed using that Darksaber.
Right. I'll kill you after the mission, if you're still alive. One other little moment that was interesting was actually right off the bat in the beginning when you've got the pilot that
yes,
takes the clone engineer hostage, first kills his buddy, who's like, hey, I'm not with this guy. Like, geez, these guys hate each other. Yeah. Anyway, and so, basically he has a death wish. Like in the moment when he takes the hostage, you feel like, oh, my attempt is, I'll let this guy go if you let me go, is probably the way that's going to work out. But I would throw out a helpful hint. It's too late for the guy, but maybe you don't antagonize the people pointing guns at you to the point that make them shoot you. And so what he does is he's like, oh, you got that tear mark. Oh, that means you're from Alderaan. I loved watching your planet blow up. And he's just poking and poking and poking until he gets shot. And it's
shot in the face.
The least surprising thing on the show. But it was interesting that he, you could tell he felt, and he says, like, you guys were terrorists. Think of how many millions you guys killed on the Death Star. She's like, which one? You're like, ooh. Yeah. So he's coming at it with, you guys are the enemy. We the Death Star. Well, we were just a beacon of light.
Yeah.
That had a gun that could kill planets. I don't know what are you talking about? And so anyway, it's just an interesting little
gun planets don't kill people. People on the gun planets kill people.
People on gun planets kill people. Do you have a gun planet permit? I do. I have a conceal carry gun planet
permit. Because that's no moon.
That's right. That's no moon. The Boba Fett series ostensibly will take place, if not entirely on Tatooine, maybe, primarily on Tatooine while he's running the crime syndicate there, in place of the Hutts. Maybe you see Cobb Vanth, since he's on Tatooine as well, kind of play into that somehow. It did occur to me, and it was like, because Boba Fett doesn't have a lot to do in this finale. He drops him off and flies off.
Yes.
They do that little pretend chase thing, which is kind of cool. It's like, oh, I'm being attacked.
Yes.
No. And then they fly into the hangar bay. And then he's like, out of here. But it occurred to me, if he had stayed with the party that basically, by the way, ran through a whole bunch of stormtroopers again. I mean, stormtroopers, I've complained about it every week, but whoo, They were extra terrible this time. Anyway, but if he had stayed, then when Luke showed up, that would have been an interesting scenario of like, wait, you were the guy that I was, I was attending your execution when I was thrown into a Sarlacc pit. He may have, I don't know what his reaction to Luke would be, but I think he would at least remember him and be like, that guy was somewhat responsible for me going through a hell of all these scars on my face. The Dark Trooper beating the living hell out of Mando, but not touching the armor. The armor completely impervious. They were not as tough as perhaps we were led to believe. Obviously, we've talked about the Mandalorian is going to be in the show, The Mandalorian. But what about Grogu? What do we see for Grogu, if at all, in Season 3?
Yeah, it would surprise me if we see very much of him in the next season. I feel like... most of the series you've had, first season and second season, most of the time they're interacting is a baby who can't talk and, a stoic soldier.
Yep.
So, there was not a lot of interaction between the two. So those scenes between Ahsoka and Grogu weren't especially, weren't lighting up the world. You needed somebody else to be like, what? Huh? What?
Right, a lot of nods and like,
yeah.
unspoken communication.
Yeah. So, the training thing, while it was interesting with Yoda and, Luke Skywalker, I don't know if it would be very interesting between, Grogu and I don't think it would be Luke. I think he'd have some apprentice or something like that, if that at all. But I kind of feel like, I would be fine if we never saw him again.
I got you. This was certainly a satisfactory way to end that storyline.
It was shocking to people, or not shocking, but it was sort of weird thing that even the makers of the series didn't anticipate, I think, or maybe they did, but
I agree.
It didn't really seem like it, because it's sort of like you didn't see Grogu until the end shot of the first episode. He wasn't in any trailers at all. The whole selling point was, who is this Mandalorian, right? It had to even tell. I guess they said that it wasn't Boba Fett, right?
They did say it wasn't.
Yeah,
Boba,
but I don't think you had his name. No,
Nope.
it was so. People were saying, watch the show about a Mandalorian, and people were just like, okay, most of the fans were like, yeah, okay, that's good. All right, we're happy. So, but yes, at the end of the episode, you had the child, Grogu, and of course, everybody's going crazy over it. So I can see people saying, like, oh my God, how can you have the show without him? But it's supposed to be about the Mandalorian.
It's the Mandalorian. Yeah, I feel like, though, Disney won't be able to pass up. He's just such a popular character. In fact, you got arguably the two most popular characters in Star Wars together right now. Luke and Baby Yoda. Like, if you did the Luke and Baby
you're not gonna
Yoda
get
show, it would
Luke.
be like...
So, to me, the way they set that up almost tells you that, we're not going to see much
agreed.
of Luke.
The way that they took off.
And because of that, I don't think we're going to see a lot of, some kind of speed training that he does, or Grogu escapes.
I agree that there's a reasonable chance that we don't see him on this show anymore. I could imagine maybe some other show being tailored to showing him in some way. But I do feel like they'll at least, in fact, Mando says, I promise you I'll see you again. So there's at least that. There might be a moment. I feel like there's not going to be an entire episode, I don't think, of Grogu.
I think it'll be a question about how many seasons we're going to get of The Mandalorian, We get a third season, but will we get a fourth?
I think there was talk. I don't know if it's signed and the ink is dry, but I think I heard that there was a season 4 being talked about. Disney's got to be thinking like, oh crap, how do we?
Do they though?
How do we get the big popular thing into the thing?
Do they though? I think one thing you kind of seen, like, think of the person in charge, Dave Filoni. So I haven't watched it, but my understanding is there will be times when it's like, oh wow, you set this thing up, and what are the answers to this question? And you don't find out for quite a bit later.
Sure.
So I think it's perfectly in keeping with that. Like, wow, we really like this character, but now we're taking him away. What?
Right. And then maybe I could imagine next season is probably going to be pretty close in time to the end of this season. But I could imagine a time jump at some point where it's like, years have passed, and now maybe Grogu's a little better trained.
Perhaps. But, it would take a while.
Grogu shows up.
I think there's enough happening with right now with Bo-Katan and Din Djarin.
No, I agree.
Where you wouldn't time jump.
In fact, you would. Let's just put it.
And it's better too. I think like you're suggesting that it's like they should be more confident in their show, that they don't feel that they're like, we have to have him in here. It's like, let us tell a story. Let us bring other people to the fore.
Put it in the context of, if season 3, episode 1, whatever, Grogu's back. Yeah. You're like, what? What was the point of him leaving in the first place? You wouldn't do that. You just can't. You can't break that moment by just undermining it. So yeah. They're gonna be away from each other for quite some time. An impactful finale for sure.
Yeah.
And one that will be talked about by Star Wars nerds for years to come. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it, sir. Had fun talking about this particular season.
Yeah.
And we're gonna be we've got a few more episodes of Star Trek Discovery to go, and we're launching into The Expanse. So come on back for that. And happy holidays, everybody. Bye now.
Bye.